Mr. John Saxon and Mr. Robert Englund. So you have to share one microphone, the other is, we don't have a battery for that one.
While you rest, what would you think about having the group here to ask them questions about what they found? Are you ready?
I like John's idea. I think we'll let you ask questions, but maybe we'll ask questions too for those of you that speak English well enough for John and I to understand. So maybe I'll start with a question. If somebody, this is one of my favorite questions, maybe John, actors love other actors. You know, like I'm a huge fan of John's, and I'm sure John has actors that he looks up to. He worked with Marlon Brando, etc. But let's ask somebody out there if anybody would like to tell me their favorite actor and why. Anybody, your favorite actor and why. And don't say me.
Where should I start? Here in the
well, anybody that has one, yeah.
Yeah. Here we have two lovely English girls.
Yes, it can be anybody you wish.
I like Christian Slater. I'm a big fan.
And what's your favorite Christian Slater performance?
Heathers.
I love Heathers. Ahead of its time. Teen cruelty.
I'm a big fan of Juliette Lewis.
Yeah. I think Brad Pitt broke her heart.
Yeah, especially Natural Born Killers. I love that film.
I love Natural Born Killers too, and also she's splendid. John, I don't know if you've seen both. Have you seen both of the Cape Fear films? The Robert Mitchum one and the Robert De Niro one. Yes, the De Niro one. That scene with she and De Niro, I felt was. I mean, it strayed into such a dangerous place sexually, but it was also truly horrifying as anything in any horror movies.
What I had in mind was, since much of this has to do with horror films, I'd like to ask what really frightens you? What scares you? Since you see this often in films, and some of you maybe have a desire to make films, and probably have tried to. I'm assuming like a lot of young people go to schools for learning how to make films, and they make films. Everybody has a camera in Los Angeles, you know, a film camera. So, since the topic often here is about horror films, what scares you knowing what goes on behind the films? What the techniques, the things that make you scared?
Okay, wer die Frage beantworten möchte, raise your hand. Okay, I'll go over there.
For me, is it the Blair Witch Project?
Blair Witch.
Blair Witch. Because it is so scary because, you know, you think it's real, what happened.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. It was a kind of like a documentary, all right?
Yes.
Yes.
And you think it's all real.
Right. I agree with you. That's what that film, why it drew such a huge audience, and it was a low-budget film that nobody expected much of.
I just wanted to add to that cinema verite style, that documentary style. There's a recent film out, and I'm sure it's played Germany, with the actress, starring the actress from Dexter. Is it Quarantine in Germany? The film, have you seen Quarantine? Oh, you must. It's the next level up of Blair Witch. And the concept is that a photojournalist, a news cameraman is trapped in a building during a plague outbreak and films the disintegration of society within the building. So that's the excuse for the camera. that the news girl, the news reporter, and the film cameraman are trapped in the building. But I love that. That's, if you liked Blair Witch, you really must seek this film out, Quarantine.
I haven't seen Quarantine, so since that first response you gave is one that we both agree about, are there any other persons having an idea of what scares you, what really frightens you? Yes?
You know, I'm a little old-fashioned. I'm scared by the stuff I don't see. Like in the old horror movies, and sorry for that, all the splatter movies, they don't get through to me. It's blood and gore, but I'm not frightened.
Well, that's a very interesting response, because before you said blood and gore, I was wondering, you do see blood and gore in many of the films these days.
Yeah.
It is matter of fact, I mean, what are the films about? The Saw, the person saw something?
But well, the Saw, I think what John's referring to are the sort of, in America, and I'm not crazy about this epithet, but in America, they're called torture porn. That's how they reference these films. For me, I think that the Eli Roth Hostel films and the Saw franchise are really more of a reaction to films that had a lot of special effects and were cost a lot of money but didn't scare. They relied on the effects, but they forgot the suspense. And so I think what happened was the Saw movies, Hostel, Cabin Fever, were a retro reaction to big budget effects movies that didn't scare any longer. And they went back to a kind of punk rock, primal fear of violence and sadism. And it was a natural reaction, almost like happened in the music industry in the late 70s with punk rock.
I don't know, but one of the films that scared me a great deal was a British film. Let me see if I've got the title straight. Don't Look Now. Does anybody know that film? Wherein what I think is important is a sense of actual loss. The film being a sudden loss of a daughter, right? For those of you who've seen it. And that kind of a feeling, which is a kind of a crushing feeling that is real, that is inside, that is not a question of action of any sort. But then the film went on with a great kind of suspense. Each and every place they went to, and finally, I think it was in Venice, they see this little creature who had dressed like the daughter dressed when she was lost. But anyway, since either of you have seen it or would like to see it, I would recommend it. But it is, for me, a kind of, I don't know what to call it, but it's different than a slasher film or anything like that. It has to do with real deep feeling of fear and loss. And I think that's what all kind of stories that are important are about.
I believe it's based on a Daphne du Maurier short story. And by the way, John may not be wanting to admit this, it also has one of the best sex scenes in movies with Julie Christie.
I'll watch it again.
That's a great film. For me, it's also an English film. And it may have to do with my age, but again, and you know, I attribute much of my fame, obviously, to Freddy Krueger, but the film that scared me the most, and it may be because I saw it as a child and I've seen it since then on the big screen, first saw it on television, but The Innocents, starring Deborah Carr and Sir Michael Redgrave. And I finally saw it, and it's famous for its cinematography by Freddie Francis. It's very famous for the black and white cinematography, much like Greg Toland is famous for the Citizen Kane and the Orson Welles films. But this film I saw on a big screen as an adult finally, in my late 40s, and it has the most sophisticated soundtrack as well. And you hear the children who have apparently been violated by the gardener and in the home and the maid. You hear their voices whispering in the wind. It literally comes out of the wind. And you hear and at one point, Deborah Carr bursts onto the roof because she imagined she saw the little girl up there doing something strange. And she bursts onto the roof of the manor house, and doves flutter and pigeons flutter into the sky. And in their wing sounds, you hear the children going, "Don't touch me, please don't touch me, don't hurt me." It's just an amazing moment. And this is one of those things where you can't always rely on the DVD or your little visual aids. I mean, this is a movie that needs to be seen on the big screen, because that was a revelation to me when I finally saw it on the big screen. But if you haven't seen The Innocents, check it out. And again, as John so eloquently described, it's what's not there. And this gentleman here, what's not there?
Let me go back to where I started. For how long were films about Dracula seen with Bela Lugosi for a start that I think I may have seen when I was a kid? Later on, Dracula became a very chic, dashing, romantic kind of character, you know? He was with a cape, and when he went to women, I actually even had an experience of a television show where I played such a character, and I was supposed to bite the girls' necks. I found the girls going, "Ah," while I was filming. I'm talking about that. But I'm getting back to the idea that, or the feeling of a film that I remember seeing, which had to do with something like, I guess, Dracula, in a sense of Nosferatu. And the more recent one that was done with Klaus Kinski, in which he was not a romantic caped hero. He was an ugly creature whose teeth seemed to be, what? I don't know, it was like almost lost in a way. And when he went down to bite at the neck of a woman or something like that, it was as if he were hungry as a child for almost being nursed in that way. I was really so impressed by that film. It made some sense to me of what Dracula, or the idea of the hunger that was about that kind of a creature. Otherwise, you know, in Dracula movies, if you had a cross, you drove away Dracula because he would do this. Well, I mean, does it make any sense? Does it make it? What if you were Jewish? Would you affected by the cross, or an Arab? Would you suddenly say, "What do you want?"
It also, I mean, Nosferatu with Klaus Kinski also influenced me. I saw it very, very near to getting the role of Freddy Krueger, and it influenced me in the baldness of Freddy. And the glove, the way I worked the gloves sometimes, because Klaus had those extended fingers and nails. The Nightmare films are very different in style, of course, but there's an image, you know, seconding John's opinion about Nosferatu. There's an image in that film that scared the bejesus out of me, which is when the boat arrives. The boat that Dracula was on, that Dracula's coffin was on, arrives in port, and there's no one on it. No one is on the boat. It's as if Dracula has feasted on every single seaman, every single sailor on the boat. Seaman?
You know, just as a coincidental reflection on what I said about Klaus Kinski, I saw him at the Manila Film Festival, I think in 1982. And I ran to him practically to tell him, happened to be with a very pretty Filipino model. And I went to him to talk to him, to tell him how much I liked the film, and all he was doing was looking at this woman. And he didn't listen to a word I was saying.
Anyone else want to share what scares them?
Yeah, I want to add something to that. What I think, I've seen a lot of movies from the past decades. I've seen some black and white movies. I really like the old Hammer movies. And there's one movie I'm really scared of, and that's Stanley Kubrick's 2001. Because I think sometimes you watch a movie and you don't expect to be frightened of that movie. And I thought when I, for the first time, saw 2001, I didn't expect there were some frightening scenes in it. I expected it would be a sci-fi movie, And then we had this storyline, and with the music and everything, with this black monoliths on the moon, and it was so scaring with the dark secrets of mankind and everything. So I think it's very effective if you have a movie where you don't expect to be frightened, and then you watch the movie, and then you think about it and say, oh my God, I'm scared of this. So these are the effective movies, not the movies where you can see that people are gutted out and stuff like that.
I think there's also an accumulation when you sit through 2001. There, at some point, there's an accumulation in the viewer of the loneliness on the screen. I was at a convention recently, and I met Keir Dullea from 2001. And when I was in college, the movie we all worshipped was called David and Lisa, starring Keir Dullea and Janet Margolin, who later became a lover of Woody Allen. And yes, and I love that film, and I had done the play. And I also love, 2001, but Keir Dullea is in another, and we're straying a little bit away from horror now, but Keir Dullea is in another very underrated movie by an underrated director, Otto Preminger, that was, again, one of the most beautiful black and white films ever made in the late 60s, called Bunny Lake is Missing. And again, this theme of loss and something, and incest. But Keir Dullea is remarkable in that film. And he looks just the same, just like John. John looks like, the first time I saw Mr. Hobbs Takes a Vacation, I hate him. Any other things that scare people? Anybody want to share that, or do we want to open the floor up to questions and answers for John and myself? Anybody have any questions? Questions? Anybody want to ask us anything about John's career or mine?
No, they're all frightened.
They're all frightened? Nobody has anything to say? Wait, this gentleman has something to say.
Hi, this is a question for Robert Englund. You played in a movie called Behind the Mask. I mean, you had a small role in that. But it seems this movie is also not successful as Freddy's New Nightmare. Do you think it was the marketing, or is it just ahead of its time?
I think it's ahead of its time, because now it's finding a cult audience behind the mask on cable in America. This happens sometimes. I did a Stephen King movie called The Mangler, which last year or the year before was on every Saturday night, prime time on Cinemax, which means it was really getting high viewership. But that's a movie I did back in the early 90s. And now it's kind of rising like cream to the surface of all the Stephen King movies, as an interesting Stephen King movie. Behind the Mask is an extraordinary film for you. It was made by a fan and for the fans, and it has an incredible lead performance. Nathan Basil in the lead, and I sort of do my best Donald Pleasance impression. I'm the Ahab. I'm obsessed with this serial killer. But yeah, it's disappointing, and John can tell you this too. Help me, John, with the title of the film you did with Robert Redford. Not Electric Horseman, the War Hunt. Also when I was in college, along with David and Lisa, the other movie we all worshipped was War Hunt with John and Robert Redford. And it was a boy's film, a man's film. We all loved it. But they don't always, become blockbusters.
Far from it. But it reminds me, we talked about Kubrick, and you spoke about Stephen King. Was the film, I can't remember the title, but Nicholson was in it, and was a Kubrick, The Shining, right? Where, in the hotel, in wherever it was. To me, both of these things have something in common. I played a soldier who, in the Korean War, was a kind of disguised murderer. And he was allowed to do this because he went out for enjoyment to find not Russian, but Chinese sentries at the edge of the Korean peninsula, and he would love coming back in the night whistling that he killed one. But the thing in The Shining, the fear of Nicholson being that's kind of a maniac that he was, and I remember how it ended. There was this picture of a school cast or group, you know, and then there was this benign picture of Nicholson as a young boy smiling like as he was apple-cheeked, you know. So that too is this kind of fear of who is whom? What do they mean? Do you know? I once asked this question the first time I went to what is it called with the group in no, but anyway, Fangoria. I went to Fangoria, and I asked that. I started doing that questioning, you know, like what really scares you? And you know what kind of letters I got back? I got letters back. It would be really scary if my best friend was sleeping with my girlfriend. Stuff like that would really wrench your soul in a way, was what people were really afraid of underneath. Almost it makes the idea that the kind of horror that we see is a way of sort of putting a mask on the real horror that is painful, of loss of some kind.
I was going to recommend a film. I'm not sure here in Germany what the release title is, but I'm thinking of this now because John was discussing the sort of arc of vampire films. And the most recent vampire film I've seen, I found definitely one of the best. It's Swedish. Have you seen this film, Let the Right One In? With the little children and the androgynous vampire. The vampire in it, you never know whether it's a boy or girl. And it's almost like a gypsy. It's lost in this sort of benign, lower middle class, suburban, you know, apartment house in Sweden. But if you haven't seen it, you must. It's the last vampire movie made. It was made after Twilight. So it's the very last vampire movie made. And it's, whereas Twilight is romantic vampire for young people, this movie, they're even younger. The little couple is even younger. And you're not even sure of their sexuality. But it's just a strange film, all in the snow. Little vampire children in the snow. An amazing film. Any questions for John or myself? Here we go. Somebody has courage.
He has to come over here.
I know, because your mic cord. Thomas is saving money on the mic cords this year.
No.
I have two questions. One for Robert. I read about a part of 2001 Maniacs. There's a part 2 coming.
Yeah, you know, I had a scheduling conflict, and because of that, I believe they're refinancing. They've also changed the script somewhat. It's sort of more of a vaudevillian farce now, and the Maniacs are on the road. They're kind of like Ken Kesey and his Merry Pranksters. They set up, I don't think you have them here in Europe except maybe little circuses. But in America they used to have these things on the long highways between gas. There would be these little sort of places where the families would pull off to get gas, and they would have a little novelty, you know, Indian relics, or there'd be a buffalo, or there'd be a giant Gila monster, or there'd be a hole that they said an alien flying saucer had landed in, and the kids would want to see it, and so mom and dad would pay an extra couple of bucks. And the Maniacs opened something like that by the side of the road, and they lure the tourists in. So I think we will do it maybe at the end of this year, I hope. Tim Sullivan's still on board. You got a question for John?
Second question for you both. What do you think about the Freddy remake? The fans read many things in the internet with Robert Englund or without Robert Englund, or any other old stars like John Saxon in little guest roles. So what do you think? Is Freddy come back?
Freddy comes back? I have no idea. I have no idea what it's about. I don't know. Do you have any inkling as to what the story is about? You can, mention about that. But I can't figure it out. The only thing I know of, I did one kind of film, which you might call a horror film, called Black Christmas, but it wasn't really. It was more of a suspense film. And it was attempted to be made as a sequel. I have not heard anything about it that was ever any good, nearly as good as the previous one. So I'm at a loss to give you any information about that, but maybe.
Well, there's, like John said, there's a difference. Sequels are different than remakes. Some movies you kind of have to leave alone. Some movies don't stand the test of time, and they're such a great story, or they have such great characters that they lend themselves to remakes, as opposed to sequels. Sequels are generally made because audiences fall in love with the characters in a franchise. Lance's character in Aliens, you know, maybe my character in Nightmare on Elm Street. The remake, here's what I know that's good about the remake and true. The producer, Michael Bay, has more money than God after Transformers. He could do anything he wants. He's decided to do this movie, which is risky. So he must love the source material. That's the first thing. I don't know anything about the director, but there's a young boy cast in it who I'm very fond of on a new American television series called the Sarah Connor Chronicles. And he plays John Connors, young John Connors. And the actor who's playing Freddy Krueger, I have been a fan of since the film Breaking Away, starring Dennis Christopher, about the bicyclists in America. And his name is Jackie Earle Haley, and he's related to Wizard of Oz, Jack Haley. And he quit acting for years and went and lived in Texas. And he had a comeback recently with Little Children, starring Kate Winslet, and then more recently, The Watchmen. He's the lead in The Watchmen, who does all the narration. And so I wish him well. I think that they're rebooting the franchise. They want to begin the franchise again for a younger audience. That is pure business. That's that choice. But I think because Michael Bay's behind it, and so far, two of the actors that I know that are involved are very quality actors. I think maybe, I think we have to be pragmatic as actors. They remake everything now. I mean, they remake everything. I could tell you things I don't like about King Kong, and I love Peter Jackson. I worship at the ground Peter Jackson walks on. I was looking forward to that King Kong, and I will be honest with you, I thought the last 30 minutes on the Empire State Building was sublime filmmaking, but I thought the film was miscast. I thought it was terribly miscast. I mean, I love Naomi Watts, but she's like 40. It's supposed to be like a 19-year-old girl, a little innocent that goes off to Kong Island, manipulated. And as much as I love Naomi Watts, I couldn't figure out what a 40-year-old woman, why would you go with all these sailors to some island with a big gorilla? You know, I don't care. And she's not out of work. We see her working on Broadway, and I don't think Jack Black was quite mature enough for his role, although I liked your actor. You know the best thing in that movie? Thomas Kretschmann. And of course, Precious, who has also played King Kong, as well as the cook. But there's a lot of risks when you remake films, as opposed to sequels. There's a lot of risks. The bar is not held so high to you. So I don't wish them bad, because Hollywood survives on sequels many times and on remakes. They've remade Stagecoach. They've remade Star is Born 4 times. They will always remake films. I mean, to me, it would be ludicrous to remake Singing in the Rain, but I imagine they'll try someday. In fact, there's talk of remaking Star is Born again, so you never know. It comes with the territory. Want to add anything to that?
No, you're so knowledgeable. I'm listening to all the things that you talk about, that many of them I don't really know, that make me want to check on to what you're saying, really.
Any more questions? Anybody?
Raise your hands.
Anybody have any questions? What scares you?
Do you get to keep the glove from the movie? And I mean, do you want to keep relics?
No, I use my trained voice. You can all hear me? Yeah? Oh, here it is. No, the original glove, I think John was involved in this too. We did some pickup shots for Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1. Pickup shots after the whole shooting schedule is over. And somebody tried to steal the glove. There was literally a convention person, masquerading as a crew person on the pickup shot day. And I got the glove finally. It was entrusted to me. So I stuffed it, the original glove, and I outlined it in red and green neon to complement the Freddy sweater. And I floated it in a box, a plexiglass block, and I gave it to my agent. Because back then, John and I could have both told you, we thought that was the end. We had no idea we'd be here.
I understand entirely. I worked on Enter the Dragon, and as I was finished and about to leave, the producer said, "Aren't you going to take the gi with you?" I said, "I've got 4 home. Why would I need that?" If I had sold that on eBay or wherever it is, I don't know what I would have been able to get, but certainly a lot of money.
So, my final question is, what is coming up next? What are your future projects?
Well, I finished last year a very low budget film that I wanted to be in. And it was written by an actor who directed it and played the starring role. It was called God's Ears, and it's about autism. Not a young man, a guy who's autistic. And he doesn't want to be a fighter, but I happen to be, I'm an employer of this guy, and I have a boxing gym, and I discover a little bit about him. The story, I think, is wonderful. And it's not one that has been, a film that has been sold yet. It's been hanging around a year, and I hope it does reach out, at least for DVD. That's what I did. And then recently, last year, I did, with the same director, a sci-fi film called War Wolves. Not werewolves, but war wolves. Sort of based on a kind of a theory, not a theory, but an idea that war is like a plague. You know, one people bite the other, as it were, and they get infected and they want to fight somebody else, and it goes around and round the whole world. That's playing on the Sci-Fi Channel right now.
I know about that movie. One thing, John, I think it was season 8 of CSI. John did the finale. It was just like a couple of years ago with Quentin Tarantino. And I think that's out now on DVD. And you guys should check that out too, because that's a great episode. I mean, Tarantino broke every rule of the formula of the show, but it's a great episode. I just finished an Italian film right next door, right south of here, in the tradition, for all you horror fans, of Dario Argento and Mario Bava, called Sinner, or maybe Night of the Sinner, which is real interesting. And I play a decadent prince, and it's sort of a combination of the Hitchcock movie Rebecca meets House of Wax. It's a very strange sort of a mixture, very Italian, but it's an English language film, and there's a wonderful Spanish actress in the Penelope Cruz kind of style in the lead that I was just enchanted to work with. Very beautiful, very wonderful young actress. And then I begin an internet webisodes called Fear Chamber in about 3 weeks, and then that will eventually lay the groundwork for a feature film called Fear Chamber, which is about phobias, sort of Girl Interrupted meets The Cuckoo's Nest, and I play the doctor in that, so you can kind of look forward to that. And there's a lot of stuff that's come out recently that you guys might like. Again, I wish you'd all look up Behind the Mask. I'm very proud of Behind the Mask. If you like retro slasher horror, you should all check out Hatchet, directed by a bright and up-and-coming kid named Adam Green. So I would look for that. And then I'm also on the Sci-Fi Channel on the nights John's not on in Black Swarm, which is, I think every actor eventually has to do a Killer Bee movie. And that's my Killer Bee movie. They keep figuring new ways to make the killer bees look good on film with the new technologies of CGI. And so we all sort of get a turn to do our Killer Bee movie.
Yeah, you know I did one, right? And I was put into a cage with the actress where all these bees, and the only reason we didn't die was it was done in Mexico, and they had a crew of about 6 young Mexican girls with X-Acto knives, you know, cutting the bees' stingers. So when they landed on me, particularly, they were going, they couldn't drill through, you know. Literally, I was with about 1,000 or more bees, and I lived through it.
Anyway, that's what we're up to. I'll just say one other thing. I'll leave it to you. I have a book coming out perhaps later this year called Hollywood Monster. John's in it, and don't worry. I don't tell any tales out of school, but no, I talk about my working with John and what a fan I am of his, and it's sort of like everything I've done since '72, and then all my theater stuff before that. So look for it. It's a very affectionate memoir, but it was a lot of hard work. So buy one.
So, our time is up. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robert Englund and Mr. John Saxon. Thank you very much. Thank you.